Part 56. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 551. Chapter 551 Being accosted. Because the sun was so bright, Jongwon squinted her eyes and raised her head to look at him after hearing the sound. Against the light, Jongwon felt that he was standing in front of her like a non-mainstream person. She stood up and saw the whole face of the person in front of her clearly. The first thing I felt was a non-mainstream person, and the second thing I felt was an unattractive non-mainstream person. Jongwon couldn't help but complain in her heart. Not as good looking as loses who. Is something wrong? Jongwon asked as politely as possible. The man smiled at her. Why are you squatting downstairs in the boys' dormitory? Waiting for my boyfriend, Jongwon blurted out without hesitation. Anyway, loses who is already in college, free to fall in love, and no one here knows them. She can say that it feels good to not have to hide them anymore. You are not a student of this school, the man was a little surprised. Jongwon shrugged. No, I'm waiting for my boyfriend, she repeated it again. The man scratched his head and shrugged, apologizing, excuse me. After saying that, he muttered and left. Jongwon heard a little bit, and it probably meant, it turns out he has an owner, and he can't afford to offend him. Watching the man walk away, Jongwon shrugged helplessly. It seems that he is still too charming, and loses who will not be relieved if he does this. Sigh, it's so difficult to be hit on even though you're beautiful. I guess the person just came here because she was younger and thought she was easy to deceive. Loses who didn't stay in the dormitory for long and came down quickly. He walked down and naturally put his arms around Jongwon's shoulders and asked, "Are you bored of waiting?" Jongwon shook his head and said, "It's okay." She didn't dare to mention what someone had just talked to her about. She was afraid that loses who would be jealous again, and she was worried. "Why did you come down so quickly?" Jongwon asked. "I was afraid that you would be impatient to wait, so I went up, put away my things, said hello to my roommate, and then came down," loses who explained. "How are the people in the dormitory?" Jongwon asked again. "Everything is fine, no problems have been found yet," loses who replied. "That's good." Jongwon seemed to be relieved when he said this. Loses who smiled. "What? Are you afraid that I will be bullied by others?" Jongwon also laughed, and she joked, "How can anyone bully my brother Joe? You are probably the only one who can bully others in this life." "No, you really said it wrong," loses who said with a smile. Why did he feel so happy after being teased like this? "What? Is someone really bullying you?" Jongwon raised her head and glanced at his profile. "The side face is also handsome. We will see him once in a long time, so take a few more looks." "Yes, a little girl," loses who said. Jongwon understood, and pointed at herself and asked, "What about me? If not? I haven't bullied you that much, right?" Jongwon was not very confident. "You don't even have enough confidence yourself." "Where to go?" Jongwon asked again. "Let's take a stroll, you should leave soon," loses who said. Jongwon nodded. Yes, they left soon, reluctant to leave, but there was nothing they could do. The two held hands and chatted and walked like most young lovers. Because loses who was good looking, he often attracted the attention of some seniors. When Jongwon saw it, she glared back fiercely. She now knew how to protect loses who. "It's too scary. It's all up to you." "How can this make people feel reassured?" Jongwon sighed with lingering fear. "They look at them, but I don't look at them anyway," loses whose eyes were always looking forward. Jongwon opened his mouth, but the last words that came to his lips were, "I believe you." Loses who smiled hee and said, "I believe in myself too." Suddenly his cell phone rang. Loses who took it out and looked at it to answer it. End of this chapter. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 552. Chapter 552 Make a Wish. Suddenly his cell phone rang. Loses who took it out and looked at it to answer it. Dad, he called. It turns out to be Lulin. Lulin on the other end didn't know what he said, but Loses who on the other end responded several times. After hanging up the phone, Jongwanan looked at Loses who. She didn't ask any questions, but Loses who knew what he should answer and said them one by one. Dad said they went shopping, found a restaurant, made a reservation, and asked us to go have dinner after dinner. Loses who paused here. Jongwanan knew it well and continued, we should leave after dinner, right? Loses who nodded, yes. Okay, let's go, nothing is more important than eating, Jongwanan said, dragging Loses who and running. Looking excited and happy, she actually hid all her emotions. Loses who felt inexplicably sad when he looked at her. He didn't want to see her pretending to be happy, but at this time today, he didn't have the courage to expose her. The place Lulin booked was very close, and the two of them walked there for more than 10 minutes. The two of them were confused when they walked into the box, because the entire box was dark, as if they had entered the wrong room. Someone was about to exit and ask the waiter about the situation when suddenly the lights in the box came on. Ah, the three adults shouted in unison childishly. Loses who and Jongwanan looked at each other and rolled their eyes inwardly. Are you surprised or surprised? Lin 11 asked excitedly. Are you surprised? Tang Yu also asked. The two of them looked helplessly at the three people at the door. In the end, Loses who turned his eyes to Lulin. At that moment, he knew that this man was not easy. The he just said must have been forced. It's quite a surprise, Jongwanan responded awkwardly. Lin 11 and Tang Yu looked at each other. Well, they were asking for boredom. The three people in the room got out of the way and let the two people outside the door walk in. As soon as Jongwanan entered, she saw a small cake with candles still burning in the center of the table. Why is there a small cake here? She asked. The three of them seemed to have forgotten. They only remembered when they heard her ask, and they all patted their heads in tacit agreement. Lin 11 explained, I didn't turn off the lights just now to scare you. It was to show you that the small candle turned out to be a little weak. It is quite weak and difficult to notice in the dark night. Why did you buy such a small cake? Loses who asked after the whole family sat down. I just passed by the cake shop and your mother said she wanted to eat cakes and bought one, Lulin said. I thought it was prepared for the two of us. The small candle is for you, Lulin said hurriedly. This time, the two of them didn't hold back their eyes, nor did they roll their eyes inwardly. They just demonstrated their ability to roll their eyes. The adults all saw the helplessness of the two of them, so they laughed awkwardly. It's like this. You are about to separate. You can make a wish and it can come true, Tang Yu said. When Jongwanan suddenly stopped talking. When I was a 2-year-old child, she didn't say the last word, so I might as well just be superstitious. Shall we make a wish? She looked at Loses who with a expectant look in her eyes. Good. Then we both make a wish, but don't tell anyone, Jongwanan said. Good. The two people stood up and faced the small cake and closed their eyes. After 10 seconds, they opened their eyes and blew out the small candles together. The wish has been made. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 553. Chapter 553 Like being in jail. Before the two of them could speak, Lin 11 excitedly brought the cake in front of him, rubbed his hands and said, It's finally ready to eat. What wish did you make? Jongwanan picked up the chopsticks and was about to eat, but then put them down and asked hesitantly. Loses who looked at her and suddenly felt funny. Did the slap in the face come so quickly? He remembered very clearly that it was the little girl who said she had made a wish not to tell anyone. Zhang Wanren smiled sheepishly when she saw Lu Zizhu smiling. She picked up the chopsticks and took a piece of vegetable into her mouth to hide her embarrassment. "Oh, I couldn't help but ask, forget it." She lowered her head and continued eating. "Really?" Lu Zizhu deliberately spoke in a long tone. "Okay, actually I really want to know." Zhang Wanren looked at Lu Zizhu frankly and sincerely. "It's not allowed to say it out loud, be good, you don't want to know." Lu Zizhu smiled and rubbed her head vigorously, and then tidied her messy hair with his hands. In the past, he only ruffled her hair, but never fixed it for her like he did today. She wanted to know, especially wanted to know. Zhang Wanren curled her lips and continued eating. She tried her best not to make blind guesses about Lu Zizhu's wishes. Indeed, after eating the meal, she forgot about what she had just made a wish for, and did not ask about it, because she knew that asking would be useless, and it would be better to say something else than saying something useless. The family's meal was not as boring as expected. Everyone tried their best to liven up the atmosphere and tried not to show their true emotions. But the moment they were really separated, each of them was reluctant to let go. It was getting late after dinner. It was time for Lu Zizhu to go back to school. His bed and other things had not been packed yet, and it was time for Zhang Wanren and the others to go back to Jinqing. The school gate is the place of separation. Lu Zizhu stood there alone with his back to the school gate. A group of them stood opposite Lu Zizhu. When he was about to leave, Lin 11 didn't show off his funny nature anymore. When he spoke, he seemed to be a different person. "Son, you eat well, study hard, and come back to CNN and us when you have time. But don't create a daughter-in-law for us out of thin air. Our family has one." She patted Lu Zizhu on the shoulder and spoke every word. Said. "I know, don't worry," Lu Zizhu said. "Eat well and don't mess around." Lu Lin only left these words and got into the car. Tang Yu also went over and patted him on the shoulder and said, "Study hard, Anan is still waiting for you." After saying that, the two women also got into the car, and for a moment only Zhang Wanren and Lu Zizhu were left looking at each other. Lu Zizhu glanced towards the car and smiled bitterly. "Why do you feel like I'm going to jail?" Zhang Wanren also felt like it, but when Lu Zizhu said this at other times, she would probably want to laugh, but now she couldn't laugh at all. "I think I want to give a speech about being imprisoned." Lu Zizhu continued to joke when Zhang Wanren remained silent. Zhang Wanren tried her best to twitch her lips, walked forward, hugged Lu Zizhu's waist tightly and hugged him. "You must take good care of yourself, don't worry about me, you have to eat well, I'm still waiting for you at home, don't let me notice you've lost weight when you come back." Zhang Wanren also spoke as if he was going to jail, but this time Lu Zizhu pursed his lips tightly and stopped making any more jokes. He also hugged Zhang Wanren tightly and responded softly, "Okay." The two stood like that hugging each other for a while, neither of them speaking, but they seemed to have said a lot of things. After a long while, the two separated. Zhang Wanren looked at Lu Zizhu with red eyes and asked, "Do you want to know what wish I made?" "It's not allowed to say it." Lu Zizhu sticks to his principle. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 554. Chapter 554. Always loyal to each other. Lu Zizhu must always be loyal to Zhang Wanren. Zhang Wanren must always be loyal to Lu Zizhu. Lu Zizhu. It's not allowed to say it. Lu Zizhu sticks to his principle. Zhang Wanren smiled and said, "Actually, it will be accurate whether you say it or not." Huh, Lu Zizhu was puzzled. "My wish is that Lu Zizhu will always be loyal to Zhang Wanren." She stated her wish directly. Lu Zizhu was stunned for a moment and said with a smile, "What a coincidence, I changed my name. Zhang Wanren will always be loyal to Lu Zizhu." They had a clear understanding of each other and made the same wish. The two looked at each other and smiled like fools. They had obviously agreed not to say anything, but they couldn't help but said it all. In fact, it will come true even if you say it or not. They both believe in each other. Jongwon took another step forward and hugged Luzes, saying, I believe in you. We must always be loyal to each other. I'm leaving. After speaking, Jongwon left Luzes' arms. She didn't know when the next time she would be in this warm embrace. Luzes originally wanted to reach out and hold her, but halfway out, he forcefully took it back, raised his hand and waved, let's go. It seemed that he said it simply, but in fact he struggled for a long time in his heart. He was afraid that if he stretched out his hand and held Jongwon, she would not be able to leave today, and would be even more sad. Rather than making her sad, it would be better to do something simple. It would be good for both of us. Jongwon nodded and turned to walk forward. She took 3 steps and turned back every time she started walking. In the end, she probably made up her mind and left simply. She got into the car, closed the door and asked the driver to start the car. The rear of the car gradually disappeared. Luzes looked at the place where the car disappeared for a long time without coming back to his senses. When he came back to his senses, he felt his eyes were a little uncomfortable, dry, and something was spinning. Closing his eyes hard, he turned around and walked into the school. After walking for more than 10 steps, someone suddenly tapped him on the shoulder. Luzes' forward step stopped instantly, and even his breath seemed to have missed a beat. Before he could look back, a head stretched out from his shoulder. Luzes' slightly smiling face suddenly collapsed. He asked in a bad tone, why is it you? Aren't you happy to see me, my brother, in this unfamiliar place? Gu Jinshu didn't notice Luzes' mood, and stretched out his long arm to put on Luzes' shoulder. Get away! Luzes glanced at that hand, as if he could it in the next second. Gu Jinshu finally noticed something was wrong, and carefully glanced at Luzes' face, and then immediately took off his arm. This guy was in a bad mood now, so he couldn't mess with him, he thought. He felt that it was safer to hold Sioran, so he held Sioran's hand tightly. What's wrong with you? He asked. Luzes ignored him and walked on as if he didn't exist. At least I'm saving my brother's face, and my wife is still here. Gu Jinshu glanced at Sioran, then whispered into Luzes' ear. His words were originally unintentional, but little did he know that they had already touched Luzes' sad point. Luzes stopped instantly and looked at him coldly. It's great to have a wife. Get away. Isn't this the time for you to torture me? Gu Jinshu muttered unconvincedly. I'm going to kick you if you don't leave. He didn't want to talk to him about anything else now. Gu Jinshu originally wanted to say something more, but Sioran pulled the corner of his clothes. Sioran saw Luzes' mood at this moment and signaled Gu Jinshu to stop talking. The main reason is that if she continues to be talkative, she may be dead. She cannot be a widow, she is still young. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 555. Chapter 555 Lovesickness. The main reason is that if she continues to be talkative, she may be dead. She cannot be a widow, she is still young. Gu Jinshu was very obedient after receiving Sioran's signal and did not seek death again. He just said, see you next time, don't be unhappy. Then he left with Sioran. Luzes watched the two people leave, and suddenly thought of Jongwon. They used to walk side by side like this, but now they are like this. Why do you suddenly feel a bit like breaking up? Luzes decided not to think about the messy things anymore. He shook his head and continued walking towards the dormitory building. When he went back, everyone in the dormitory was already there. As soon as he returned, his roommates greeted him warmly. He nodded slightly in response, then returned to his bed and started packing his things. In fact, he is not very adaptable to this kind of life. But he wanted to experience it. The roommates were very enthusiastic. When they saw him packing his things, they all shouted to come over and help. Losers who couldn't resist their enthusiasm, and within a short time the things were packed together by the four old men. After packing their things, the family was bored. After talking for a while, they started playing games again. Losers who was also invited. He agreed without hesitation, without thinking. Maybe by having fun, he would forget the unhappy things. However, after a few games, the facts proved that Losers who was still naive. "You guys go ahead and play, I'll make a call," Losers who said, and exited the game quickly. The roommates acted like I understand everything and didn't force him any further. They were making too much noise playing games, so Losers who stood up and walked to the balcony to make a video call. The other side. Jongwanan was sitting in the car looking at the roof of the car in a daze. Suddenly, her cell phone rang, interrupting her random thoughts. Jongwanan was startled, and she hurriedly took out her mobile phone. When she looked at the notes, it turned out that it was the person she missed. Jongwanan raised her lips and smiled, straightened her clothes and sat down, then answered the call. "Hello, have you missed me so soon?" Her tone was pretending to be relaxed. The second the call was connected, Losers who first looked at her face carefully and then looked at her eyes. He breathed a sigh of relief after finding nothing unusual. "A little bit," he answered Jongwanan's question just now. "Just think about it, there is no need to hide it." Jongwanan said, "You miss me now? What should you do in the future? Aren't you afraid of getting lovesick?" She deliberately teased Losers who. Obviously she missed him too. It was obviously just a short separation, but it was really useless. "I'm afraid, but I can't help it, unless..." Losers who deliberately paused here. Jongwanan panicked and said, "You should finish your sentence. How can there be someone like you?" I stopped talking in the middle of the sentence. Losers who smiled softly and continued what he said just now, "Unless I find a new person I like here, I won't miss you." "You Losers who." We all agreed, "But you have an idea just after I left?" "You scumbag," Jongwanan said angrily. "This car belongs to me, and it's on speakerphone. Be careful what you say," she threatened again. Then Losers who heard a lot of messy coughing, which seemed to be in conjunction with what Jongwanan had just said, but more like a reminder to him. After being speechless for a moment, Losers who finally lowered his head and admitted his mistake. "Brother, I was wrong. I was just kidding." Jongwanan was satisfied now, smiling brightly at the camera. She praised, "This is right. Just correct it if you know it's wrong." It was not because there were many people and big bosses on her side, so of course he had to admit his mistake in time. "How are you getting along with your roommates after returning to the dormitory?" Jongwanan asked. "I'm sorry everyone, it's the third update today. I really can't hold on any longer. It's been a dizzy day. I'm really sorry and hope you can understand." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 556. Chapter 556. A person will suffer a loss if he is outside. How are you getting along with your roommates after returning to the dormitory? Jongwanan asked. Losers who listened carefully, they were still playing games crazily. It's pretty good, I just played a few games, so don't worry. Jongwanan nodded, get along well and put your bad temper behind you. You will suffer a lot if you are alone outside. Just like a young adult, what he said was quite reasonable, Losers who thought. Okay, don't worry, I promise not to cause trouble, Losers who winked at Jongwanan in front of the camera. The two chatted for a while. Losers who had something to do, so he hung up the phone first. After hanging up the phone, Jongwanan's little smile gradually disappeared, and she began to stare out the window in a daze again. Life without Luzes was so boring, and she looked like a fool. After Luzes hung up the phone, he walked out of the balcony. His roommates were already playing games, and they all had a joking expression on their faces when he came out. "Have you talked to your girlfriend on the phone? It must be uncomfortable to be in a long-distance relationship now, right?" a roommate asked. Luzes smiled lowly but did not answer. Suddenly he felt a little stuck in his heart. His roommate saw that he was a little sad and stopped teasing him. He patted him on the shoulder and said, "Year after year passes very quickly." "Yes, and it's the Mid-Autumn Festival soon, so we can meet." Another roommate also comforted me. Luzes said softly picked up his bag and walked out with a few others. Asterisk. A few days after school started, all the things were completed one after another, and military training officially began. Military training was really tiring, but Luzes still insisted on spending some time every night to call Jongwon. Because the little girl is where he stores electricity. "I'm telling you secretly, someone sent me a love letter today," Jongwon said on the other end of the phone, and then mysteriously took out a small pink envelope from her school bag. Luzes face turned dark immediately when he saw the pink envelope. "Did you bring it back?" "Yes, let me show it to you," and throw it away immediately after reading it, Jongwon said, shaking the pink envelope with a proud smile on his face. "Don't accept this kind of thing from now on," Luzes said. "Oh, I got it," Jongwon said, looking down at the trash can and throwing it in. Then he asked, "Have you received it?" "Well, I didn't answer the call. I asked all my roommates to push me back. They all know that I have a girlfriend," Luzes said calmly. "They are having military training these days. Since they are on the playground and they are freshmen, many senior students come over to hang out when they have time. He is handsome and looks more energetic when he wears camouflage uniforms, so many girls are attracted by him." Sensible Jongwon gave him a thumbs up. "Then can you understand something?" Luzes looked at her with a somewhat resentful look. "Let me tell you something secretly. I bought that little pink envelope myself." He Jongwon smiled evilly. "Childish. Then you believe it too. When will you come back?" Jongwon couldn't help but ask. She really wanted Luzes to come back now. Luzes was silent for a while before the camera, raised his head and said, "I'm sorry, Anan, I'm very busy now that school has just started. I guess I won't be able to spare time at the end of Saturday. I can go back during the Mid-Autumn Festival." Jongwon didn't expect such an answer. She opened her mouth and said, "It's okay. I happen to be busy studying. I may not have time to play with you when you come back." Luzes smiled and said no more. He actually didn't know what to say at the moment. "Go to bed early. We have military training tomorrow. Don't be too tired." Jongwon ended the call. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 557. Chapter 557 New Life Trajectory. Go to bed early. We have military training tomorrow. Don't be too tired. Jongwon ended the call. After hanging up the phone, Jongwon sighed helplessly and got into bed. She was now sleeping in Luzes room and had taken his room as her own because there was a faint fragrance of Luzes body in the room. Luzes has a new life trajectory at Nanda. Jongwon is still the same as before in Jincheng. It's just that he doesn't have Luzes company when going to and from school. But generally speaking, he can adapt. After all, this is a process. It's okay if he doesn't adapt. Method. Since she started going to and from school by herself, Zhang Baihui has been waiting at the school gate on time every morning. When she sees Jongwon coming, she will greet her warmly and then run over. The same is true today. "Why are you waiting here again?" Jongwon asked him. "Waiting for you to go in together. I also brought you breakfast," Zhang Baihui said, taking food and drink from his handbag. Jongwanan looked at it and politely refused. I have already had breakfast, you can eat it yourself. Zhang Baihui was stunned and retracted, well, since you have already eaten, I will enjoy this delicious food to myself. The two of them chatted and went to the classroom. Most of the people in the classroom were already here. They were about to take the high school entrance examination, and the study atmosphere was getting thicker. Only Su Jiaojiao and He Chiu seemed out of place. Others were reading books and memorizing things seriously, and the two of them were playing around as usual. Zhang Wanan walked over and took a look at the two people who were still arguing. The two of them were very thoughtful and even drew pictures of each other. However, the pictures were a bit horrible. They were really ugly. Can you two behave well and leave a good impression on each other? Look at this painting, tisk tisk tisk. Zhang Wanan couldn't help but complain. The first impression we left on each other was good, but later on, you know, we can't change it, Su Jiaojiao said helplessly. They first met when they were in kindergarten. At that time, they were reserved and innocent, and they left a good impression on each other. However, as they grew older, they turned into monsters, and their image no longer existed. Have you memorized the text? The teacher will check it later, Zhang Wanan reminded kindly. Su Jiaojiao and He Chiu immediately stopped writing in their hands and looked at each other in panic. They couldn't help but curse in their hearts. Zhang Wanan knew what was going on as soon as he saw their expressions. Hurry up and carry as much as you can. Wait a minute, let me record Su Jiaojiao's face just now, He Chiu said and started to write again. You draw me and I will draw you. Su Jiaojiao naturally did not admit defeat. It's hopeless, Zhang Wanan muttered and walked to his seat. How do you say a sentence? The authorities are confused and the onlookers know clearly. The two people were probably confused to death, and they were tired from watching. Asterisk. Half a month has passed and Luzes, whose military training has ended. However, he was unable to go home on Saturdays and weekends due to some matters. He has been counting the days since he came here. Today is the weekend. He and his roommate just went out to buy some things and came back. He thought he should give the little girl a call. As a result, the cell phone rang before he picked it up and put it on the table. Luzes, who picked it up and looked at it, and the corners of his mouth turned up instantly. He thought that this was probably because they had a tacit understanding. Zhang Wanan took the initiative to call. Let me see if you have lost weight or become darker, Zhang Wanan said seriously when he opened his mouth. You didn't even tell me that you missed me before I watched it, Luzes, whose voice sounded a bit complaining. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 558. Chapter 558. I was really scared. You didn't even tell me that you missed me before I watched it, Luzes, whose voice sounded a bit complaining. Don't think about it, you don't know? Do you still need me to tell you? Come on, stop talking nonsense, Zhang Wanan urged. Luzes, who ignored her request to hurry up, and just smiled. What's wrong with you today? You spoke a little hastily, and you were a little rushed. I see you talk a lot of nonsense. Hurry up, Zhang Wanan couldn't help shouting. Luzes, who was stunned by her yelling, but he wanted to laugh a little bit, but the look in Zhang Wanan's face was a bit scary. He was afraid that he would really make her angry, so he held back his laughter and backed away a little while holding his phone, trying to make Zhang Wanan laugh. Wanan saw more. Is it okay now, Luzes, who asked. Zhang Wanan's tone became less aggressive, and even his expression returned to normal, and he said sweetly, okay. What happened just now? His tone of voice was so harsh and his expression was so scary. I was so scared that I didn't dare to speak, Luzes, who complained. Zhang Wanan clicked his tongue twice, without explaining, and asked, are you still so scared that you dare not speak? Of course I have to be more cowardly in front of you, Luzes, who said this with a pitiful look, as if he was being bullied. Zhang Wanan smiled and explained, I just want to see if you have lost weight and if you have become darker. Fortunately, there are no big changes. I eat well and sleep soundly here, but I'm afraid that if I change my appearance, you won't recognize me when I go back, Lu Zizhu said. Oh, don't worry, even if you turn into a big stupid pig, I will still know you, Zhang Wanan comforted him. Lu Zizhu rolled his eyes and said nothing. I guess you must have missed me, Zhang Wanan said again. Well, indeed, you must have missed me too, right? Lu Zizhu also asked her. Zhang Wanan made a right gesture and suddenly laughed, looking very good. Why are you laughing suddenly? Lu Zizhu was a little confused. Just thinking about seeing you soon makes me want to laugh, Zhang Wanan explained. Can you see me, right away? What do you mean? Lu Zizhu felt a little excited. Is it possible that Zhang Wanan is coming to find me? He couldn't help but think. It's the Mid-Autumn Festival soon, won't you come back? Zhang Wanan's voice gradually became lowered, and even his expression became disappointed. So that's it, Lu Zizhu was also a little disappointed. If you go back, you will definitely go back, just study hard and wait for me at home, Lu Zizhu said. Zhang Wanan felt a little happier now and nodded vigorously, okay. The two chatted for a long time. Today, Su Jiao asked Zhang Wanan to go out to play. Su Jiao was about to arrive at this time. After chatting for a few more words, Zhang Wanan hung up the phone and went to change clothes. In the past, when Lu Zizhu didn't go to college, her parents were busy at work and someone would accompany her. But now that he's gone, there's no one at home to accompany her, except Aunt Lu and Xiaolan. But Aunt Lu and Xiaolan were very busy and had no time to play with her. After Zhang Wanan changed her clothes, the doorbell rang. Needless to say, it must be Su Jiao. So she picked up her bag and hurried downstairs, but when she opened the door, she found Su Jiao's shadow at the door. Zhang Wanan was a little confused, wondering if she was hearing something. Just as she was about to close the door, a shadow appeared next to her. Zhang Wanan's eyes widened and she was startled. Just as she was about to call someone, she heard a familiar voice, Anan. It's me, ha ha ha. Su Jiao? You scared me to death. Why did I open the door? There was no one at the door. Zhang Wanan looked at Su Jiao with a pale face. She was really frightened. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 559. Chapter 559, The worst possible outcome is that my birthday will become a Memorial Day. She was really frightened. She thought it was some bad guy just now, and she almost shouted, but no one showed up even if she shouted, because the first thought in her mind was to call Lu Zizhu's name. I'm sorry, I wanted to give you a surprise, but I didn't expect. Su Jiao lowered his head in embarrassment. You almost scared me to death. It's okay. Do you want to come in for a drink of water before we leave? Zhang Wanan said and stepped aside, planning to let Su Jiao in. Su Jiao shook her head, grabbed her and said, let's leave quickly. I think it will take a long time. Ah. What are you going to do? Zhang Wanan felt a little regretful. She thought she was just going shopping, but now it seems that is not the case. Isn't he Chiu's birthday coming soon? I have time today to help him pick out some gifts, Su Jiao explained. Isn't it about half a month before his birthday? Yes, more than half a month passed quickly. Have you thought about what you want to buy? Not yet, let's go and have a look. Su Jiao was a little confused. She searched on her browser for a long time last night but couldn't find any suitable gifts. Then go and have a look. It's not easy to take a taxi here in the Lu family. When Su Jiao came, the family driver brought them to her. She didn't let the driver leave yet, so she directly asked the driver to take them to the largest shopping mall in the city center. "Anan, what do you think I should give him?" Su Jiaojiao asked. "What does he usually like to do?" Zhang Wanan asked. After all, the two of them often made trouble together. She felt that Su Jiaojiao knew something about him. Sure enough, Su Jiaojiao blurted out without hesitation the next second, "Bully me and seek abuse." "It's true, it's too true, I just don't know what to answer." Zhang Wanan was silent for a while. Seeing that she was silent, Su Jiaojiao couldn't help shaking her arm again. "You have experience, please help me think of a solution." Su Jiaojiao felt that Zhang Wanan would also give Lu Zizhu some gifts during some festivals, so she should be more experienced than herself. "I remember you haven't come to see me before." "What did you give me before?" Zhang Wanan asked. "Before, the ones I gave away were ugly dolls I caught," Su Jiaojiao answered honestly. "How about if that doesn't work, I'll catch another one?" Su Jiaojiao asked when Zhang Wanan stopped talking again. "Jiaojiao, forgive me for coming up with an unreliable method. Why don't you two just mess around on his birthday? As long as you accompany him to mess around, he will definitely be happy," Zhang Wanan said seriously. "Isn't this bad?" "It would be bad if I beat him to tears on his birthday," Su Jiaojiao said worriedly. "Forget it, let's go buy gifts." Zhang Wanan pursed her lips and said nothing. The two found a store in the mall. There were many people in the store and it seemed very popular. The main reason was that Su Jiaojiao liked the things in it, which were all pranksters. "I think these things are good." Su Jiaojiao rubbed her excited little hands evilly. Zhang Wanan was also attracted by those things, so the two unreliable people got together and started picking up the shopping cart without saying a word. "Are you sure you want to give these things?" Zhang Wanan suddenly remembered that the gift he wanted to give was a birthday gift. "Think about it, the worst thing is that the birthday will become a Memorial Day." He, Su Jiaojiao said nonchalantly. "Is it so cruel?" Zhang Wanan thought. "Aren't you distressed?" Zhang Wanan asked. Su Jiaojiao picked up a pair of sunglasses and put them on, then took them off again. One of the eyes popped out. She thought it was funny and put them in the shopping cart. She said, "I don't feel bad, I have money." End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 560. Chapter 560 Brain Damage Drug. Su Jiaojiao picked up a pair of sunglasses and put them on, then took them off again. One of the eyes popped out. She thought it was funny and put them in the shopping cart. She said, "I don't feel bad, I have money." "I'm not asking if you feel sorry for the money." Zhang Wanan also took the same one, thinking that she could scare Lu Zizhu when he came back for the Mid-Autumn Festival. Of course, if she could still remember it by then. "What is that? Don't you feel sorry for He Chiu? It's not good if you're scared," Zhang Wanan asked with a smirk on his face. Su Jiaojiao paused while holding the thing, and she shrugged, "It's the same thing again, at worst, the birthday will become a Memorial Day." Su Jiaojiao smiled as she said that. Zhang Wanan walked around her side and complained in a low voice, "I really admire you too." Su Jiaojiao raised his eyebrows, "What's wrong?" "He's so confused, like a fool." "Huh?" Su Jiaojiao looked confused and was so stunned that he forgot to choose a gift. "It's okay, just pick it up quickly." Zhang Wanan did not continue, thinking that one day they would realize it on their own, and it would be bad for her to say too much. Su Jiaojiao said oh and picked up a box of something called brain fragments and said with a smile, "That's good, He Chiu happens to be brain dead." Zhang Wanan looked back and took a box and threw it into Su Jiaojiao's shopping cart. "Take another box, one for each of you. How about you call your sisters mentally retarded in a different way?" Su Jiaojiao said and put his arm around Zhang Wanan's shoulders. Zhang Wanan smiled and said nothing. Su Jiaojiao spent about an hour shopping in this store. She carefully selected a whole toy that was as small as half a car. When she was about to return home with the full load, she suddenly patted her head and stood still. Zhang Wanan took off the sunglasses with pop-up eyes and asked, "What's wrong?" "Anan, I don't know what happened just now. It seemed that my conscience had discovered it. I actually thought about choosing another gift for He Chiu. Then I thought that if I scared him, I would give him a serious gift to compensate him." Su Qiaoqiao frowned tightly. "Explain." Zhang Wanan rolled her eyes helplessly and put away her sunglasses and said, "It's not like that, but your conscience has caught it. Let's go and buy a serious gift." Su Qiaoqiao curled her lips and was dragged away by Zhang Wanan. She really didn't expect that one day she would find out her conscience, and it was really strange when she took He Chiu into consideration. Zhang Wanan dragged Su Qiaoqiao to a gift shop, the same place where she bought a birthday gift for Lu Zizhu. Probably because of the scene, Zhang Wanan stood at the counter in a daze and forgot to move. Su Qiaoqiao noticed something was wrong and poked her cautiously. "What's wrong?" Zhang Wanan shook his head and took another look at the items on the counter before heading elsewhere. After shopping in the store for another 20 minutes, Su Qiaoqiao said that she was buying a serious gift, but it was not very serious at all. It was just that the packaging box of the gift was very exquisite, and the gift was a set of perverted simulation questions. Zhang Wanan was speechless after looking at the set of simulation questions. He wanted to speak, but no matter how much he opened his mouth, he didn't know what to say. Even if she could speak words, what came out of her mouth would definitely be complaints. To be honest, she was no longer able to complain about Su Qiaoqiao, a straight woman today. Compared with Su Qiaoqiao, the birthday gift she chose for He Chiu was too normal. She bought a very exquisite notebook with a password lock. Because she accidentally discovered that He Chiu had the habit of writing a diary, she bought one. The two of them finished picking out gifts, drank milk tea and ate a small cake, and then went back to their respective homes. When Zhang Wanan returned home, the house was still deserted. Even Aunt Lu and Xiaolan were not there. After changing her shoes, she lay down on the sofa to catch up on the show. End of this chapter.